having a tea party. I really wanted to use this one. It's got 3 girls in a garden, and I think that it is just on theme, and they're just so cute. I have this other light blue teacup. These were a gift, and if I'm not mistaken, they are from the 1930s. They are from a while ago, and this one I believe I got myself. So good. This is my first time using them. I don't think that these are meant to be used. Oh, sorry. I just have to do a few things, guys. So like I was saying, this is my little tea party. I've never used these teacups. I actually don't think that these are meant to be used, especially these up here. These are very, very special. That's why I'm using this one. This one I actually got at an antique shop, so I don't mind drinking out of this one, but the other ones I do. So I'm gonna put my tea right here and we are going to get started. So this is going to be the last series where I talk about my Antonia, and one of the reasons why I wanted to keep talking about it, I know you guys are like, Sophie, move on already, like get over this. I can't do it, guys. I can't move on just yet until I analyze it using a different theory, because this book is so well-rounded that it has so many opportunities and so many scenes that could be analyzed using various theories. Today, however, I am going to use feminist theory to analyze my Antonia, or my Antonia. You guys know that I call it my Antonia. So I have created little tabs for me to go and analyze each scene. And before though, I wanted to talk to you guys about feminist theory for those of you guys who don't know. And I just wanted to clarify some things, because I know that some guys will hear feminist and completely shut down. It's a very unique topic, and I am having to yell because my neighbors are extremely loud and I want you guys to be able to hear me, and I'm trying to block out their footsteps and their dishwasher and everything else that they are doing. They're running a marathon up there. But I wanted to start by providing you guys the definition of feminist theory, because I know that it can be a sensitive topic, and when we hear feminist, I know we can like just shut down because we're like, oh my gosh, these are the people who hate men. Feminism is a social, political, and cultural movement that advocates for the rights and equality of all genders. It primarily focuses on historical and systematic inequalities faced by women. And it also challenges to dismantle the patriarchal structures and biases. The term for the hatred against men is misandry. So that would be the opposite, I would think, of feminists, because feminists look to provide equality for all genders. Misandry is like the same thing as misogyny. So misogyny is the hatred of women, and misandry is the hatred of men. I just wanted to use feminist theory to analyze my Antonia, because there are a lot of women in the book who have strong roles. If you guys want to check out my other video where I do give the summary of my Antonia, go check it out. I'll also link it down below. But I really just want to get into the examples and analyze the book a little bit more. Tea time. So there have been some critics who are known for developing or talking about feminism. Simone de Beauvoir is known for publishing The Second Sex, and this is her most renowned book. In this book, she talks about how women are usually defined as the other in relation to men who are the subject. So we see that very clearly in my Antonia, because not only is Jim the narrator, so he would be the subject, and Antonia is the other. She's not not even like the main character in a story about her. In this book, she says that one is not born a woman, but rather one becomes a woman. What Simone de Beauvoir is referring to here is saying that the environment of the woman influences and impacts the development of that woman. This made me think of The Man Who Was Almost a Man by Richard Wright. If you guys have not read that short American fiction story, I highly recommend. That idea reminded me of Richard Wright's The Man Who Was Almost a Man. I feel like it has the same kind of meaning. And it's interesting that Simone de Beauvoir is saying one is not born a woman, but rather becomes a woman. So I feel like Richard Wright is kind of saying the same thing, like The Man Who Was Almost a Man. It's a good story. The setting takes place in the South. It's about an African-American boy who craves that respect and wants to be taken seriously. But because of his location, he's not able to gain that respect. At the end, him shooting a mule, even if it was accidentally, shows his immaturity, shows that he is not really there to be considered a man, you know? And so it's cool to see how both sexes have their own ideas and themes about becoming who they are. So I want to move on. Well, the first example that I wanted to talk about is when Antonia is partying. So Antonia is going to dances, and whenever she is at the dance, this guy approaches her. His name is Young Harry Payne. Okay, so it says, afterward, he begged Antonia to let him walk home with her. She said she supposed he was a nice young man, as he was one of Mrs. Francis' friends, and she didn't mind. On the back porch, he tried to kiss her, and when she protested because he was going to be married on Monday, he caught her and kissed her until she got one hand free and slapped him. Mr. Harling put his beer bottles down on the table. This is what I have been expecting, Antonia. You've been going with girls who have a reputation for being free and easy, and now you've got the same reputation. I won't have this and that fellow tramping about my backyard all the time. This is the end of it tonight. It stops short. You can quit going to these dances, or you can hunt another place. Think it over. So she is staying at Mr. Harling's house because she works there. So Mr. Harling catches that, and he's like, okay, so because you've been hanging out with these people, now they think that you are just like them. So to put an end to that, he's like, you can stop going to the dances. Well, let's read over what happens. The next morning, when Mrs. Harling and Francis tried to reason with Antonia, they found her agitated but determined. Stop going to the tent, she panted. I wouldn't think of it for a minute. My own father couldn't make me stop. Mr. Harling ain't my boss outside my work. I won't give up my friends either. The boys I go with are nice fellows. I thought Mr. Payne was alright too. So this is where we see her rebellion, and this reminds me of Kanye's song, My Mama Couldn't Get Through to Me. If her family couldn't get through to her, it was very unlikely that Mr. Harling would be able to reason with her. And Mrs. Harling talks to her, and she's like, you'll have to do one thing or the other, Antonia. I can't go back on what Mr. Harling has said. This is his house. And so we see here two different types of women. We see Mrs. Harling, and then we see Antonia. Mrs. Harling is very traditional. She said, you know what? This is my husband's house. I am not going to go back on what he said. I'm not going to contradict him because this is his house. So it shows that she is under him. She is submissive. She is the traditional type of woman. She's a trad wife, basically. And Antonia is like free and rebellious. She's like, no, like, I'm not gonna stop. Everybody goes. Why am I going to stop? I just thought he was a good guy, I think that this is where, the feminist lens comes in, because we see how she doesn't want to adapt, or she questions and she challenges the patriarchal views and the traditional views that are imposed. And so this is a good example of her challenging those practices. Antonia, unfortunately, doesn't reason with Mr. Harling. And she had it really, really good there. They were really good people. And so she's like, you know what? I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna go to the Cutter's house and I'm gonna work there because they're not going to tell me what to do. Mr. Cutter wasn't a noble man. Him and his wife fought a lot. Before I get there, I want to talk about the fact that, you know, everybody was going to these dances. And Jim was also going to the dances, but Jim didn't have permission either. He was actually sneaking out of his house to go to the parties. And so one day he sees his grandma and she was crying. And he's like, I put my arms around her. I couldn't bear to see her cry. What is it, grandmother? Is it the firemen's dances? She nodded. I'm sorry I sneaked off like that, but there's nothing wrong about the dances and I haven't done anything wrong. I like all those country girls and I like to dance with them. That's all there is to it. But it ain't right to deceive us, son. And it brings blame on us. People say that you're growing up to be a bad boy and that ain't just to us. And so I think it's very interesting to see how Antonia wasn't the only one who was receiving guidance. Jim was also receiving guidance from his family, from his grandmother, because she's like, well, those aren't really like good places to be at. It's like being at the club. Throwing shade. Exactly what we would hear today. Like, there's nothing wrong with going out. Go out, have fun, go dance, go party, go do this, go do that. And so she's like, yeah, but now they think that you are a bad boy. And again, remember, this family had money. They had to set themselves apart. Jim going to the same places, it's like he was kind of lowering his standards, putting himself in those places that he really didn't belong in. Third point I wanted to talk about. So now we can go back to Antonia and when she moved in to the Cutter's house. Antonia moves to the Cutter's house and Mr. Cutter tells Antonia, like, hey, we're gonna go out and I have some really valuable stuff here at the house, so I don't want you to leave and I don't want you to invite anybody else to the house. She's like, yeah, sure, you know, I'll be here. And she goes off to Mrs. Harling's house and she tells him like, hey, you know, like he just asked me to stay here. I don't really feel safe, you know, spending the night alone. So Mrs. Harling suggests like, oh, what if you and Jim switch? Like, what if Jim stays over there and you stay over here? And then she's like, yes, Jim, please, you know, I'll fix my room. And Jim is like, okay, yeah, that's fine. So Jim goes to Mr. Cutter's house and he spends the night there and he hears a noise. It was very strange when Mr. Cutter like attacks him and like goes on top of him, and when he realizes that it isn't Antonia, he starts beating him, and somehow he escapes and he gets out through the window and he runs back to his house all beaten, bleeding and stuff. And so he goes in and he crashes in his room, and the next morning, you know, his grandma sees him and she sees how beat up he is, and he describes himself as looking like a plum. So he was just like purple and he had like a busted lip and everything. And so he hated Antonia for that because he was like, she made me go through this. Like, it was her idea. But then Antonia was grateful because it's like, well, if I would have been over there, then I would have gotten raped. This is where I start thinking, okay, what if Antonia would have just listened to Mr. Harling from the get-go? And she would have said, you know what? I'll stop going to the dances. I'll stay in. But she didn't listen. And so here we start seeing that because of her rebellion, she starts kind of experiencing more hardships. You know, after her father dies, she starts working in the field. The fields was mostly a job for men. It wasn't a job for the girls. Like, they did more home stuff as opposed to being out in the field. But when her father passes, she takes on that responsibility. And so that is another example of her challenging the patriarchal structures that were in place at the time. But I want to fast forward and I want to talk about another female character in the novel, and her name is Lena. Lena visits him in college and Jim developed feelings for Lena, and she was like, I don't really want a husband though. She's like, I'm not going to marry anybody. Didn't you know that? And then he's like, nonsense, Lena. He's like, that's what girls say, but you know better. Every handsome girl like you marries, of course. And she shook her head and she's like, not me. And he's like, but why not? Like, what makes you say that? And Lena laughed and she's like, well, it's mainly because I don't want a husband. And she's like, men are all right for friends, but as soon as you marry them, they turn into cranky old fathers, even the wild ones. They begin to tell you what's sensible and what's foolish and want you to stick at home all the time. I prefer to be foolish when I feel like it and be accountable to nobody. He's like, but you'll get lonesome. You'll get tired of this sort of life and you'll want a family. And she's like, not me. I like to be lonesome. It's like when I went to work for Mr. Thomas, I was 19 years old and I had never slept a night in my life when there wasn't 3 in the bed. I never had a minute to myself except when I was off with the cattle. So now that she is out on her own and she has her own business, she's like, I'm gonna stay alone. I don't want to marry. I don't want children. I don't want to deal with that. And so she's another character who challenges the traditional beliefs about women having to marry. And so Jim goes back to town and he goes to see Antonia. He asks his grandmother like what happened. But she's like, you know what? You need to go talk to Mrs. Stevens because she is gonna give you all the tea about what happened with Antonia. He goes to talk to Mrs. Stevens and they're talking about how Antonia got pregnant, the guy didn't marry her, took her money and left her. And so this conversation between Mrs. Stevens and Jim is very, very important too. My Antonia had so much good in her, had come home disgraced. And that Lena Lingard, that was always a bad one, say what you will, had turned out so well and was coming home here every summer in her silks and her satins and doing so much for her mother. I give credit where credit is due, but you know well enough, Jim Burden. There's a great difference in the principles of those two girls. And here it was the good one that had come to grief. We see that Antonia, again, she had very high expectations. Everybody wanted Antonia to succeed. And so when she didn't go through with what they were expecting, it was a disappointment. But after seeing the way that she handled being a single mother, you know, she says, Antonia is a natural born mother. And this phrase, Antonia is a natural born mother, takes me back to Simone de Beauvoir, because she says that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. And so this thought right here, this is something that feminists often argue, that not every woman is maternal. Are we born with the motherly instinct? This is gonna be my question. And Jim goes and talks to her and then he just confuses the situation more because he tells her, do you know, Antonia, since I've been away, I think of you more often than of anyone else in this part of the world. I'd have liked to have you for a sweetheart or a wife or my mother or my sister, anything that a woman can be to a man. The idea of you is a part of my mind. You influence my likes, my dislikes, all my tastes. Hundreds of times when I don't realize it, you really are a part of me. So he's saying, if we're going to analyze it through a feminist lens, he's saying that we as women, we can only be a sweetheart, a wife, a mother, or a sister. Can we not be anything else? Can we not be a business partner? Can we not, you know, I'm exaggerating here, but he's very traditional. Again, remember, Jim has the Western beliefs instilled in him. And we see that Antonia is the definition of strength and defiance. She's rebellious. And Lena Lingard does represent independence. And Lena refuses marriage. You know, she's like, I don't want to get married. I don't want to deal with kids. I want to be with myself. And that's it. Like Mrs. Harling and even Jim's grandmother are representations of traditional women. They meet the domestic expectations of that time period. And if we analyze the names of these characters, Mrs. Harling sounds like darling and the Cutters just sounds like they're gonna hurt. I don't know if Cather did that on purpose. I do want to believe that she was very intentional with the names, especially for Jim Burden, because Antonia is an immigrant. We do see how it's like the white man's burden. Just to conclude, guys, we see the tension again between the male narration and the female experience. And again, Cather is very subtle, but she is subtly hinting at the reevaluation of women's work, endurance, and identity. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my tea party. I know I had so much fun. Let me know in the comment section what other book you guys want me to analyze and read, and I will do that. Okay, bye guys.